Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So a female soccer player recently wrote for the New York Post, speaking about her experience in the sport, but also stressing the importance of genetic testing in women's soccer. She said that genetic testing, chromosomal testing is an absolute must. And then all hell broke loose. Her own teammates turned against her, claiming that she doesn't speak for them, and basically accused her of transphobia and racism. So this is Elizabeth Eddy. She plays for Angel City Football Club, and that's in the National Women's Soccer League. She was saying in order for this league to continue to thrive, this sort of testing is a must. And I also say the same thing about the WNBA. But when people are of the mindset that a man can be a woman due to identifying as one, then what hope is there? Because it appears that Elizabeth Eddy's teammates are all for men playing in the Women's Soccer League. They're all for it because it's transphobic to say that they shouldn't, to say that they should play, in the men's category or an open category of some kind. So they're definitely going to be for it when it comes to athletes with DSD who are male infiltrating the women's category. And she was accused of being a racist because the article had an image of an African soccer player. She said, "When I joined the National Women's Soccer League 11 years ago, our games were live streamed to fans on YouTube. Today, our league is halfway through a 4-year, $240 million television contract. Our teams are among the most valuable franchises in women's sports. Yet, with this remarkable growth comes an urgent challenge. How do we preserve women's rights and competitive fairness while fostering meaningful inclusion?" So she's not against inclusion per se, but inclusion doesn't mean that we ruin the integrity of women's soccer. "I'm proud to have played a small role in our league's transformation from struggling startup to supercharged celebrity maker. I've been a part of winning 7 titles, 3 NWSL championships, 3 regular season titles, and 1 International Champions Cup. But I'm concerned that without clarity about who the league is for, it will lose its identity and its momentum." And I absolutely agree. I think allowing men to compete in women's soccer hurts women's soccer. And then she speaks about the conversations that have surrounded various sports in the women's category, such as swimming, track and field. And she pointed out that those sports are slowly introducing genetic tests and introducing measures to protect the female category. But the same conversation hasn't been had for soccer. And this is so refreshing after the likes of Megan Rapinoe, who advocated for men to compete in women's soccer, whilst claiming to be a champion of women's rights because she talked about equal pay. On one hand, she was saying that women need to be treated just as good as the men when it comes to pay. But on the other hand, she was advocating for men to take the place of women in soccer. And all Elizabeth is saying is that there needs to be clarity and that there needs to be clear guidelines when it comes to who qualifies to compete in the women's category. Can men qualify to compete in the women's category? That question needs to be answered. And she said that uncertainty doesn't help. Players have been excluded and then unexcluded. Administrators have blamed and criticised each other, and fans have used the uncertainty to harass players. So she pointed out that World Athletics tightened their eligibility criteria in 2023 for international track and field competitions. Other countries' domestic organisations did the same, including UK Athletics Federation, and England's FA banned transgender athletes from competing in women's football, for example. And then she said, addressing this challenge entails remembering why women's sports categories exist in the first place, not to exclude, but to create a space where female athletes can physically compete on equal footing. Studies show measurable differences between men and women in muscle mass, bone density, and cardiovascular capacity, which directly affect competitive outcomes. Further research has found male muscular advantage is only minimally reduced by about 5% over 12 months by testosterone suppression. Fairness and inclusion are core American values. Reasonable people can disagree about where to draw lines, but avoiding a conversation altogether by shutting out diverse views does not serve us. In fact, we owe it to current and future female athletes to solve this. Then she spoke about the SRY genetic marker that indicates male developmental pathways during fetal growth, providing objective scientific criteria for competitive categorization. And then she said that testing could easily integrate into medical evaluations through existing blood draws or non-invasive cheek swabs. So they can test the blood that you've already given, for your various examinations, or they can give you a simple cheek swab. That's it. Whereas critics argue that it's invasive and can cause psychological harm. Hopefully people aren't buying that anymore. Athletes testing positive for the SRY gene could receive comprehensive support, including counselling, privacy protections, and inclusion in professional networks. World Athletics has successfully used similar protocols since 2018, with legal challenges ultimately supporting such policies' scientific basis. So that was the article, and her teammates turned on her. Her teammates did the very thing that she warned people about, shutting down the conversation. When you label people and you call them transphobic or you call them racists, that is shutting down the conversation, a conversation that is very important when we're talking about protecting the integrity of women's soccer and women's sports in general. But her very own teammates shut down the conversation and is trying to silence her now.
Going into this, I'm a little bit nervous because I think it's a big job to represent your team and speak for your team, and not just that, speak for others who this will be important to. We've all obviously seen the article that was written in the New York Post earlier this week, so I really want to start off by saying that that article does not speak for this team in this locker room. I've had a lot of combos with my teammates in the past few days, and they are hurt and they are harmed by the article, and also they are disgusted by some of the things that were said in the article, and it's really important for me to say that. And we don't agree with the things written for a plethora of reasons, but mostly the undertones come across as transphobic and racist as well. The article calls for genetic testing on certain players, and it has a photo of an African player as a headline.
Yeah, you can say the article calls for certain players, but the fact is every single person who wants to compete in women's soccer will undergo the genetic testing. It's not calling for certain players. Elizabeth didn't specifically name anybody. She called for genetic testing. This is something that is done on all athletes. Any and every athlete who want to compete in the women's category must provide a quick cheek swab. So don't make it sound like she's singling out, a black player and the article was targeted towards this person, because that is a lie. This will be something that every single player, regardless of their race, regardless of what they look like, regardless of how good of an athlete they are, they would be required to provide a simple cheek swab to make sure that they are indeed female, which is the most basic requirement to compete in the women's category. And everybody should agree that if one wants to compete in the women's category, one has to be female. Everybody should agree with that. And those who don't agree have bought into a cultish ideology that is actually harming women, that is harming female athletes, that is taking away opportunities from female athletes. No woman should be sat at home because a male athlete has taken her place.
Very harmful, and to me it's inherently racist, because to single out this community based on them looking or being different is absolutely a problem. And as a mixed woman with a Black family, I'm devastated by the undertones of this article.
For me personally, when I think of LA and I think of Angel City, I think of a place that was founded upon inclusivity and love for all people. That's what our locker room is, that's what our staff is, that's what our fan base is. Angel City is a place for everyone. It always will be. That's how it was from the beginning. That's how it always will be, period. And I think this situation, there's, Lisa, you kind of touched on it. There's an element of timing to it where this feels like another really big challenge that we have to go through as a team on top of an already really challenging year. And it's definitely not the note that we as a group want to end on. And so I just want everyone to know that we're doing our best in the locker room to preserve respect and belonging on this team. And we look forward to ending the season on as positive of a note as possible.
So I don't even know what to say to that. Throwing this woman under the bus because she's called for more measures to protect women's soccer. But this comes down to the fact that they are okay with men competing in women's soccer. If he identifies as a woman, they're okay with that. That's why they're able to take this stance. I'm assuming they're okay with men being in their locker room too. And any woman who objects will be given those labels. And that's very, very sad indeed. They're not thinking about the opportunities that are going to be taken away from women if they have to compete against men. Megan Rapinoe was all for transgender soccer players, male soccer players competing in women's soccer. But did she ever have to compete against a man? No. Did she ever have to get undressed in front of a man in the locker room? No. The fact that a report by the UN revealed that women have lost out on 900 medals to male athletes proves that this is a real problem. And it's not going away until measures are put in place to ensure that the female category is protected. Because male athletes do have an advantage over females, because male bodies are different from female bodies. And that has nothing to do with race. To bring race into it, to talk about coming from a mixed family and all of this. Sex and race are two different things. And you know what's more binary than the other? Sex. Race, you could say, is on a spectrum for sure. There are people who have olive skin and you don't even know what race to put them in, to categorize them as. There are biracial people. You don't know how to categorize them when it comes to race. But that's not the case when it comes to sex. It's very clear. In order to compete in women's soccer, it should be a requirement that one has XX chromosomes. And it's very easy to prove that, actually. And nobody has to be singled out or targeted when every single soccer player who wants to compete in the women's category has to provide a simple cheek swab. That's all that Elizabeth Eddy was calling for. She didn't write an article disparaging black soccer players or soccer players who look a certain way. They can make all of those implications without providing any evidence whatsoever. Not even to give a line from the article that you were particularly offended by. Please quote from the article and tell us what you were offended by. Be specific. Don't just put blanket labels on people who have genuine concerns. Women who are actually standing up for other women and young girls. No young girl should be told that she has to be okay with a man being in her locker room because of his identity. That is misogyny. And then to compare black women to men, and that a man who either has DSD or identifies as trans is a representation of black women. I'm going to have to break it to you. That is actually racism. You can't be inclusive of everyone in a sport category without negating the category. Not everyone is a woman. Not everyone is a heavyweight. Not everyone is under 18 or over 45 age categories. You have to test for the boundaries of the category. If you don't, you are excluding the people the category was meant for. It's not racist to know men are not women. What a load of baloney. Trans maiden cowards can't argue with the actual point, so have to add in the nuclear-ism to discredit a female athlete with bigger ovaries than them. You are all pathetic. Men, including those with DSDs, are not women and don't belong in a women's league. If there was no women's league, none of you would be able to play professional soccer because you would not make the men's squad. Stand up for women or shut the F up. Congratulations for throwing women under the bus to defend perverts. And I'm going to leave it there. I think these wonderful women said it there. They've said it all. And again, thank you to Elizabeth Eddy for writing such a comprehensive and sound article. And I'm glad the New York Post gave her that platform. And this is what we need in order to protect the future of women's soccer. We need women like Elizabeth Eddy, who's brave enough to speak out. You shouldn't even have to be brave to speak out about this, because what Elizabeth Eddy said was 100% correct. Men cannot be women and shouldn't be playing in women's soccer. And in order to safeguard against that, a simple cheek swab should be required of every athlete. Proving one's eligibility does exclude when one doesn't meet that criteria, yes. But in sports, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's nothing discriminatory about that. There's nothing racist about that. And to claim otherwise is going to require some serious cognitive dissonance. So the women of Angel City Football Club, stand up for women and girls for a change. Stop throwing women and girls under the bus to protect men who want to compete in a category they do not belong in. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.